All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. Happy Friday. We made it. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Belmont. I am a wine and cheese educator. I'm a New York native of Eastern Long Island, longtime resident of Astoria, Queens. Let's go Mets. I'm the former education manager of, thank you, Nick, former education manager of New York City's Murray's Cheese, also the former education manager of Bedales of Borough Market here in London, where I've lived with my wife for the last 4 years. This is going to be a tough night. I'm going to talk about food for the next 90 minutes or so, and then I'm going to try and go to bed without having a late night snack. Good luck. I'm also the UK wine ambassador for Lieber Appliances that do a wonderful range of wine cabinets. I proudly support a variety of international trade associations as a presenter and educator. I hold certifications with the WSET and certified an American wine expert by the Napa Valley Wine Academy. This past summer, I launched goodwinegoodpeople.com, where I am the UK's only online retailer dedicated to shipping personalized wine selections. It's super cool. Check it out. Let's see. I'm proud to report that for the Good Wine, Good People portfolio, American wines lead the pack. I got more American wines listed than anything else, and probably more New York State wines than any retailer in the United Kingdom. I just lost my notes, and I'm only talking about myself. Off to a great start. But we've got a great night ahead of us. My password is Finger Lakes 2016. My wife and I were married up there. Please work. Yes, fantastic. So lastly, one of my proudest moments, I was a judge for the New York State Wine Classic in 2019. I fell in love with wine in New York, the people, the community. My experience there has created the lens of which I see the world of wine. And that is more than enough about me. I'm obviously thrilled to be here. We've got such a fun topic tonight, and I am in even better company. So I am joined by our esteemed guests, the producers of the wines in this evening's flight. We have Dave Peterson, owner of Swedish Hill Winery. Hi, Dave. Say
hello.
Hi. We have Ryan Bossert, owner of Chateau, LaFayette, Reneau. Hi, Ryan. We have Julia Hoyle, winemaker of Hosmer Winery. Hi, Julia. We have Nick Bozzo, winemaker and owner of Nostrano Vineyards. Hey, Nick. We have Lynn Fahey, the winemaker for Keuka Spring Vineyards. Hi, Lynn. And last but not least, Gerald Bailey, the director of sales for Lenz Winery. So we want tonight's tasting to be a conversation, not just between myself and the panelists, but with you as well. We have the Q&A box. Don't hesitate to pop in questions there, and we will do our best to answer them as we go along. If not, we'll make sure we tackle everything at the end. There's also a poll. If we have time at the end, we'll tackle those poll questions, just some fun stuff there. And before we get started into the wines, just want to remind everyone that tonight's presentation is hosted by the New York State Wine and Grape Foundation. The website newyorkwines.org is an incredible resource for additional information about all things wine in the Empire State. So the theme of this evening's tasting is wines for Thanksgiving. And, we hope that tonight is a great introduction to the New York State regions, styles, grapes, producers, and wines, all just in time to taste test before the holidays. I don't think there is another holiday that is centered around food and the communal table that can rival Thanksgiving. 2020 has been a hell of a year, and here in London, we are now in our second kind of hardcore lockdown. And there's something I realized just really in the past couple of weeks, that how much my love and appreciation for wine is connected to sharing it with other people. So even if you're just within your immediate family, with your immediate family this Thanksgiving, crack open a bottle of New York State wine. When you are in good company, it'll never taste better. Again, it's a day for giving thanks for all that we have. I think that's more important this year than perhaps ever before. So it's also a day to be thankful for elastic waistbands. Great. And of course, you know, we have this bounty of New York State wine to pair with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, green bean casseroles, so many casseroles, pumpkin pie, the list goes on. You know, I think about Thanksgiving, I think about autumn produce, baking spices, sage, thyme, butter. You know, these are the things that come to mind when I think of the perfect wines to pair with your Thanksgiving meal. You know, and there's really so much more to pair with than just the main event. Panelists, raise your hand if your evening starts or your day starts with a cheese board. Anybody do cheese on Thanksgiving? There we go. All right, good. Thank you for appeasing me. I appreciate that. I always have a massive cheese board to start the day. And, you know, we have hors d'oeuvres. You know, listen, the chef just needs something to sip on while they're cooking, right? Did you know that Americans consume an average of 4,500 calories on Thanksgiving? We got to talk about fat. You know, it's one of the biggest secrets to wine pairing is balancing fat and acid. You know, fat weighs your palate down, acidity comes in and breaks up the fat. It refreshes your palate. It gets you salivating, you know, gets you ready for your next bite, so on and so forth. Now, luckily, our cool climate wines from New York State have freshness and acidity for days. These wines are truly friendly for your Thanksgiving table. You know, remember, everyone's palate is different. The part of your brain that processes flavor is closely related to the parts of your brain that manage memory and emotion. It's literally what makes you you. If you've ever tried a wine while you're on vacation and you loved it, and you loved it so much that you brought it home, and then you open that same bottle on a Tuesday night in your living room and it's absolute crap. You know, what happened? Did the wine magically transform when it was in your suitcase? You know, no, probably not. You're just not on vacation anymore. And so, you know, we're lucky in the sense that we're going to let the festive spirit wash over us. You know, really, I think we just need to take that into our hearts for the rest of the year. And our New York State wines, they're really never going to taste better. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first guest. We have Dave Peterson, owner of Swedish Hill Winery, which is based in the Finger Lakes. And we are going to kick this flight off with some bubbles. Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. We're going to taste a range of wines tonight. And this, I think, Thanksgiving is about this amazing range of flavors. So it's almost hard to go wrong with what you're going to choose, I suppose, as far as with your Thanksgiving dinner. But I think that a lot of New York wines fit the profile really well. Dan kind of set the stage with some of that, the natural acidity. I think the fruit-driven wines of New York State are going to fit in with most people's types of foods that they serve. So just a little bit about us. We're a 34-year-old winery in the Finger Lakes. We make a fairly large range of wines, including sparkling wines. We've been making sparkling wines since 1991. Currently, we have 4 different sparkling wines, or actually normally have 5. We're out of one of those right now. So the one that what Dan chose for the seminar tonight is our top selling one. It's got a great price in terms of that, and I'll lead in with starting with one of the reasons for that is that it's 85% Kyogre White. So a lot of this blend is made from Keuka. That is a grape that is very well suited to the Finger Lakes. It originated, it's a Cornell University variety that was kind of the first in their premium introductions of white wine grapes. So the other 15% is Riesling. And actually back in 1991, when we made our first sparkling wine, this was the first sparkling that we made, and we introduced some later. It also has a little bit of residual sugar to it. Now, we make drier as well as a little bit sweeter sparkling wines than this one. And I guess I want to thank Prosecco for opening up the world to a greater range of flavors as far as what people might expect, what people might like in sparkling wines. So this wine is certainly, given the varietals in there, also that it's got a little bit of residual sugar, it definitely has some fruit characteristics to it. It's not an aged, toasty, yeasty sparkling wine, so it's fresher. Definitely that Riesling-like character, I think. Keuka, even though it's mainly Keuka, Keuka's almost a Riesling wannabe at times, as far as some of the flavors that we get from it. I always like to quote one of my fellow winemakers on the Keuka wine trail in the Finger Lakes. He calls Keuka the wonder grape. So Julia's smiling because she knows who that is. So, but it is very versatile. It lends itself to sparkling wine quite well in a couple of different ways. First of all, you don't want varietal in sparkling wines that it's going to come up with some bitterness. That bitterness really stands out when you've got a bubbly. Keuka's low in phenolics that cause that bitterness. It also has its ripe flavors. If you want a fruit-driven sparkling wine, Keuka's peak of flavors for what most winemakers are looking for tend to be at a lower sugar level than other varieties. So when Keuka hits its peak, when it's normally harvested, is basically at the same harvest point where you would pick other varietals for sparkling wine. So it's got some crispness, it's low in phenolics, it's got nice flavors at that particular point. So we've had a lot. It's our most popular sparkling. I think it's versatile. I think people should think of sparkling wines in general as being more versatile than what they do. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's something to pop a cork on New Year's and ching ching with the glasses or at a wedding or something. But sparkling wines can be great with food. I think they're great with Thanksgiving. They can be a little bit on the drier side, or this one's got about 2% residual sugar. So we also, I said, we make some sparkling wines that are drier. One of them that we make is a Keuka blend with Chardonnay. It's actually more Chardonnay in it than Keuka. So for people that like it a little drier and maybe a little less fruit than this one, the Swedish Hill Naturel is maybe more up their alley. But no, this is, like I said, a great sparkling to have anytime or with food. I think there's a lot of food choices that you can make when you use sparkling wines, and I hope everybody's enjoying that.
It's real nice, Dave. The balance, I think, between that touch of residual sugar and the acidity is key here. I think you guys nailed it. And I think that just makes it all the more versatile for food pairings. I am of the opinion that sparkling wine can be paired from the start of the meal all the way through the end. There are a wide variety of styles of sparkling wine just within New York State. And there's really a lot to play with there. You know, we were talking about fat earlier, and you know, again, fat weighs your palate down. Sparkling wines are the best. I mean, those bubbles are also helping break up that fat, lift that fat up off your palate. And these wines, they have that just really great acid, and you get that little bit of a sal, you know, that little kind of tart in the back of your jowls there, and it gets you salivating, ready for your next bite, your next sip, so on and so forth. So Dave, do you have any, specific Thanksgiving traditions, whether it's food wise or otherwise? And what are you looking forward to next week?
Well, I look forward to, I'm always the guy in charge of the squash for some reason. I don't know why that is, but they must like my squash. So even though we're not hosting the dinner, we're going to my daughter's. So I've been put in charge of that. I think the tradition is that we get as many different bottles of wine on the table as we can fit. That's kind of a tradition with us. We've sometimes we have more bottles than people, and especially this year, we're not going to have as many people. So, it's a fun meal. Like you said, it's always centered. It's the one holiday centered around food. as a major component of the gathering. So, but we usually start out with sparkling wine too. So,
how do you prepare that squash?
oh, well, it's a new adventure every year. I try something different, but not the mashed up stuff. So I have some variation on usually butternut, but I'll change it up some years. So
that's great. Do you have any other hybrid grape varietals or native grape varietals that you think have a good place at the Thanksgiving table?
well, when we first started the winery, we were probably more hybrids and natives than vinifera. I think we started the winery had 5 wines or 6 wines, and Chardonnay was the only vinifera. Over time, most of our varietals today are vinifera types. We don't we use hybrids more in blends. The exception with one of our other brands, Goose Watch, we do Traminette, another Cornell developed one as a varietal that's got a lot of Gewürztraminer like character. That's a hybrid that I think because of everybody knows Gewürztraminer is a Thanksgiving favorite, and Traminette has a lot of those characteristics. So I think of that as a good one. If you're on the red side, we also do a Chambourcin, one of the few red hybrid varietals that we do. That's softer in tannins. It reminds me at times of the Pinot Noir like texture in that softer tannins and everything. So I think that's one that probably would fit with a lot of fruit in the wine and everything as well. So, but
awesome, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That Traminette, that floral quality that you get with Traminette and Gewürztraminer, those are some of my go-to cheese wines for sure. I think that kind of lifted aromatics just really plays with some of those more barnyardy flavors you're going to get in cheeses, and it's a great way to start a killer evening. Thanks again. We are going to go on to our next guest. We have Ryan Bossert, owner of Chateau LaFayette Reneau. Ryan, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dan.
Good. What you got for us today?
All right. So today we have our Seyval-Chardonnay. So I'm the owner of Chateau LaFayette Reneau, a winery that was founded back in 1985, located on the southeast side of Seneca Lake. Seneca Lake is the largest of the Finger Lakes by volume. Grow mostly vinifera varietals, with the exception of Seyval. And the reason for this pairing, like Dave said, is there is a place for blending hybrids with vinifera, and we feel that Seyval is a great match for Chardonnay. Chardonnay tends to have some nice notes of apple on it, especially when picked a little earlier, like it is for this blend. And the Seyval contributes a little more citrus notes, and it also has a really great way of allowing shale, some minerality to show through, which is very prevalent in the soils on our farm.
That's great. Touch of residual sugar in this one, yeah?
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps. Not too much, just enough to make it easier drinking, very approachable. In my opinion, this is a nice starter for your Thanksgiving feast. Possibly after Dave's sparkling, move to the Seyval Chard. We find ourselves when we open a bottle that we always seem to finish it. It's just very approachable. Nice acid, gets your salivary glands working and get you ready for some food.
Yeah, I think it's really nice. I always like to talk about kind of the journey that a wine has on your palate, kind of from the tip of your tongue down through your mid palate, down to the back of your mouth, and so on. And I think that just touch of residual sugar really does a nice job to unlock kind of the riper fruit characteristics in the mid palate there. And so you get that nice touch of acidity up front, and then it just kind of pops in the middle, and you get a lot of those really nice orchard fruits. And that's prime Thanksgiving territory for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. How about you? Do you have any, specific Thanksgiving traditions, things you're looking forward to, food related or otherwise? How do you celebrate?
So our household, Thanksgiving starts on Wednesday for us. We don't wait till Thursday. We break out the wine and the food Wednesday afternoon, usually mid-afternoon, and I eat straight through Thursday night. So it's basically all about family and food. It's, to me, the greatest holiday of the year. Every great thing you can want from a holiday without the pressure of gifts.
Yeah, true. Tell that to the cook. I'm sure they probably feel just a little bit of pressure, but that's all right. Let's see. And so then you said this was your only hybrid and vinifera blend, yeah?
That's correct, yes.
I think it's great. Honestly, I don't, over here in London, I have very little access to native hybrid grapes. Trying to explain them to Brits it's a bit tricky sometimes, especially when you start to get into more kind of foxy flavors. But I'm so impressed with these first two wines, and I don't know anybody that I don't know that I could put these wines in front of anybody and have them not put a smile on their face, right? They're joyful, and for me, I'm just kind of running through my head all these wonderful food pairing ideas, and there's really a lot to play with. Very good. Ryan, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, pleasure. All right, we're going to move on. We have our next guest, Miss Julia Hoyle, winemaker from Hosmer Winery, another Finger Lakes representative here. How you doing, Julia?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. What you got for us?
So we have our single wheel Riesling. So this is, Hosmer's property goes back to the early 70s. Longtime neighbors with Dave Peterson. Started out also primarily hybrid early on, planted Chardonnay, Riesling, and then 1985 became a winery. Single wheel Riesling, sort of as the property evolved, turned into our idea of a single block, a single vineyard Riesling for us. It does have about 12 grams of residual sugar. And that idea is that sort of 10 to 13, 14 gram per liter sugar mark ages beautifully. So it is, very expressive when young, but also has a really great long trajectory. This wine is all clone 90, which we primarily have. We have all sorts of clones in the vineyard, but this particular block is clone 90. Tim Hosmer and I, so he's the next generation in the Hosmer family, about my age, a couple of years older. Tim singles out that block of fruit. We work on it together, and I just kind of see it through fermentation and then bottle up our single wheel Riesling separate from, some of our other Rieslings. We run from dry and, as of last year, ice wine. So you can kind of get any Riesling you want from Hosmer.
So I think it's hard to have a conversation about New York State wine without, really talking about Riesling. There is a lot of it out there. Definitely the flagship white varietal for the Finger Lakes. And for me, it's always been, my favorite grape. And that's probably because, the first time wine really clicked for me, I was in a Finger Lakes tasting room, speaking to a winemaker like yourself, tasting a Riesling, looking at the lake, seeing it all, and it kind of all just very holistically kind of came together. And the more I've tasted from international styles, other, more New York Rieslings, it's such a versatile grape depending on what style you're going for. And so, this one, just like you said, just a touch of residual sugar, I'm tasting it now. I'm putting this on the really dry side of off dry, right? And I think that's probably my favorite, very much in line with like a Mosel style, because again, that sugar is really unlocking those riper fruit characteristics, and it gets you so much more than if you went hardcore, bone dry, laser acidic. You know, if we're talking about that journey on the palate, you end up with a much more linear experience, whereas this, you know, you could end up more like a ribbon dancer than a air traffic controller, you know. Talk to me about, different opportunities to maximize dry Riesling versus off-dry Riesling versus sweet Riesling versus dessert styles. How do they all come together, and particularly at the Thanksgiving table?
Yeah. So going back to, you talked about fat and acid earlier, but that was, what I was thinking about when I sort of had those couple prep questions come in. Riesling like this has a little bit of residual sugar, but, I personally love like the really crispy skin on turkey. And you can usually find me trying to sneak those little bits. And I'm like, yeah, like that part of the turkey with a glass of Riesling with a tiny bit of RS, perfect. Usually we do have like a late harvest or an ice wine or two, depending on how many people we are, at the end of a meal. Also great acid, but if you do cheese at the end, as opposed to the beginning, yep, has the place there. And then the dry styles, they kind of fit in anywhere, whether or not you're just kind of hanging out in the afternoon and just want a glass of Riesling.
Right.
And yeah, usually we have the gamut because everyone has different tastes at the table. So
right. Sometimes those dry styles are great to wake up your palate, whether that's in the beginning or whether that's after a big heavy meal. Sometimes it's nice to just get that electricity and that energy that you get from those really dry styles. I was wondering, so you mentioned the turkey skin, and actually one of the first things that kind of popped into my head was saltiness.
Yeah.
Right? How do you think that saltiness plays with varying styles of Riesling?
So I think that both sort of saltiness, and then again, I would say most Riesling styles, a little less so when you get on the really sweet side, and really do cause you to salivate. And so they're tapping into that same sort of pleasure zone on your palate of like, ooh, this is just delicious. Like salted butter, like that sensation, which I totally eat by the slice. It's delicious. Is like just as pleasurable as a really crisp white wine. So.
Awesome. This 2020 was my year to learn sourdough bread baking. And with sourdough bread baking comes butter. Really just good butter. And I think just having good butter, it's almost on the cheese board as like a cheese, really. We used to do butter making workshops at Murray's Cheese, and I still have I can see it from here, my butter churn, which is so much fun. But we would do a butter tasting. I mean, you could really, the provenance of milk can really make for different components to butter. I even have some goat butter in the fridge right now, which is really fun to play with. And so, listen, if you're gonna do a butter tasting, I think Thanksgiving's probably the day to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The wine is lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, I'm sorry, I believe that everyone can see the Q&A, but there was a question about Ryan's wine, which I see he's answered. There was no oak on that Seyval-Chardonnay blend. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Lee. Next, we are going to go to the Hudson Valley. We have Nick Bozzo, the winemaker and owner of Nostrano Vineyards, and we are moving into red wine.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Nick.
Listen, I don't have a little PowerPoint made for you. They literally ripped me out of the tasting room. Oh, you do?
Oh, we got it.
Listen, my wife just ripped me out of my tasting room, said you got to go on a Zoom meeting. This is my first Zoom meeting ever.
How did you make it this far into 2020 without a Zoom meeting?
When you stay in the vineyards as long as I do and just hang out with the birds, you can make it this long. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate having me up here today. So you guys want to talk about the Pinot? I have both my Pinot and my Rosé, because both of these come from our Pinot Noir block. So what we do is our Pinot Noir, we usually do about 55 cases. We have about 2 acres. The rest of our Pinot Noir goes to our Rosé. which we are currently sold out of. So we do kind of split up our production between our Pinot Noir and our Rosé. Our Rosé is definitely picked a little bit earlier. We definitely let our Pinot Noir hang a little bit longer. So it's definitely a balance. We are a very small vineyard, very family style kind of setting vineyard. The family vineyard started in about 1948, mostly Concords and Niagaras and mostly stone fruit. When I took I'm fourth generation farmer. So when I took the farm over, I kind of remodeled and rescaled our farm here and started planting a lot of grapes that I was told not to. Mostly Pinot Noir, Pinot Grigio, Riesling. So I kind of went against the grain when I started planting my grapes here because I was a stubborn kid at the age of 22. I just went along with, like you were saying, when you went to the Finger Lakes and had your Riesling. That's I kind of connected with you there, Dan, because when I studied in Syracuse, environmental and science and forestry up in Syracuse, I frequently went to the Finger Lakes. And when I started tasting different Rieslings, that's kind of where my passion, I guess, for wine started, which is a weird grape. And that's what mostly our farm here is planted with Riesling. Besides Pinot Noir, that's my most temperamental grape. That's like a love-hate kind of relationship I have going on with. Pinot Noir. So we can talk about this a little bit. It's planted. We have about 2 acres of Pinot Noir planted. It's planted mostly on a south-facing slope, east to west kind of row, how we planted it. It is one of the hardest grapes to grow in the Hudson Valley, I would have to say, besides our Riesling. It's very temperamental. But
Temperamental anywhere, let alone the Hudson Valley.
So like I said, when I was young and when I planted this in 2012, I thought I had a great idea. I'm growing Pinot Noir, I'm growing Riesling. And it's kind of been a love-hate relationship ever since. Finally, in the last, I have to say, 3-4 years, we finally have really come to grasp and with our growing and harvesting and kind of getting the grapes to be something where we can turn into a really nice bottle of red wine. It hasn't been easy. It's been a learning experience ever since we planted it. But this is our 2019 Pinot Noir. Funny thing about it is, it's great wine for Thanksgiving. There you go. We're a little unorthodox on Thanksgiving. We do deep fried prime rib. Yes, we do the turkey. Grandma still does the turkey, but we do a deep fried prime rib. And when I tell you this Pinot Noir pairs like perfectly with that, it's a little unorthodox. It's great though. You definitely get a little cherry. It's definitely, I have to say, this year, our 2019 is probably, every year we kind of step it up a little bit. We're getting a little bit more consistency every year, which is finally nice to see, especially in the Hudson Valley. It's very, like I said, temperamental with our seasons and the weather. But this year, our last year, we're getting a little bit more towards our consistency of our wine, having a little bit more controlled environment with it. So that's definitely nice. We also, like I said, we make about 55 cases of Pinot Noir, but then we also do a large amount of our rosé is from our Pinot Noir. So we definitely do a little bit of an early harvest with our rosé. It's called our Ava Rosé, and it's probably our best seller throughout the year, which is sold out currently. Got one bottle here that I kind of stashed away just to kind of show you guys. So we are currently planting another 2 acres of Pinot Noir. Definitely one of our top selling wines, goes very fast. So it's definitely an honor to be able to grow this in the Hudson Valley. Definitely, like I said, very temperamental. It's definitely one of our biggest priorities. We grow probably about 14 varieties of grapes here at Nostrano. Most of them are our table grapes for our wholesale because we do a lot of farm markets still. So about 7 to 8 varieties are towards our fresh market seedless table grapes, and then our other several varieties are towards our winemaking facility.
Super cool. I think you're in good company in New York State, kind of taking the hard route here. I think that is a trait that runs through most winemakers. And I think that's something that as New Yorkers, I think we embrace, which is great. I'm super impressed by this wine. I'll be perfectly frank, can't think of another, estate grown Hudson Valley red that I've enjoyed as much as I've enjoyed this. So,
I mean, very simple. I mean, the wine, most of the time like I said, over the years, we've done some oaking. So what we did with the 2019, most of the time it spent most of its life in stainless steel.
Yeah.
Most of it. We've kind of learned from over oaking and doing some, tannins. We do a lot of cold soaking and all different. Every year we've done something different to kind of manipulate what we're doing. We finally have gotten on the right track. So we do a little bit of cold soaking. Most of its life it's spent in stainless steel. We do a little bit at the end when we're finishing. We do a little bit of oaking to it. So like I said, most of its life is in stainless steel. We do not try to over oak it. We kind of pull out the aromas in the beginning when we're cold soaking and try to kind of get those colors and, the aromas out of it in the beginning, because it is a very tough grape. It's very tough to get color from and, kind of get that real kind of burgundy, French style wine in New York, which like I said, from the beginning, I've learned it was a tough task from our first wine in 2012 to our 2019 is a dramatic difference. And that's just from our learning and our experience with the fruit and kind of going with the flow every year with the different kind of environmental kind of things we go through every year in the Hudson Valley, which is anywhere in the Finger Lakes, anywhere. It's always a struggle to have those perfect environmental kind of, situations happen for you to grow the perfect grape. But this year, our 2019, even this year that we picked for our 2020, we had a really great harvest. So like I said, this pairs perfectly. Like I said, we're a little unconventional, a deep fried prime rib. I don't know who does that too often. Pairs perfectly. So it's really cool. Love to hear about the Riesling. Our other bigger grower on our property would be our Riesling, which is about 4 acres, which is one of my favorite grapes to grow. In the Hudson Valley, also kind of on the level of complexity of Riesling in the Hudson Valley. Other ones, I saw the question you guys asked me, other grapes I really love, which I'm going back to because like I said, I was kind of a stubborn young guy that thought I was going to grow these certain grapes and I had my mind set. I'm going back to Catawba, Baco Noir, Gammy Noir, Chelios. I think someone said what they say. I forget the guy you guys said. Maybe you guys, I forgot what you guys said. I have it written down here. I can't find it. But just more conventional New York grapes. I think they're kind of a lost art, especially like Steve Castles. I'm sure you guys maybe heard of Steve Castles. He's a grape grower. He writes some books. Just kind of going back to the basics of New York grapes, those beginning grapes that kind of set the standard for all these other grapes to kind of grow, and kind of going back to the basics of those real conventional New York grapes, like I said, Baco Noir, even like Traminette and stuff like that. I'm kind of like reverting instead of being more of I need to grow Pinot Noir and Riesling, and we do grow some Pinot Grigio. These grapes, I'm kind of reverting back to the original grapes that were grown back in the day of New York State and kind of regenerate their life, like a Baco Noir or a Catawba or a Chelios. Those are kind of, for me, those are like forgotten grapes of the Hudson Valley. And I think they still have real kind of strong characteristics that kind of is something really cool about the Hudson Valley. So we are planning more Gammy Noir and Chelios, and those are some other grapes you might kind of see coming from us, which are kind of unheard of. It's definitely kind of something specific to the Hudson Valley, which is kind of cool.
There's so much history in New York.
Yeah, you really don't understand, like the first winery, the first vineyard in the Hudson Valley of New York State. So there's really cool history in the Hudson Valley. that people
Yeah,
really.
like conventionally, people might think that you're bucking a trend, but really, I mean, why not fall back on what's works well, And I think that
Yes.
New York has the benefit of not being a place that has one variety or even just vitis vinifera. And so, I think one of the hardest things that I have as an educator here is putting New York State into one box, and it doesn't really work, And so I think that winemakers, you guys can really lean on that and take advantage of it. We did a tasting here. We had some New York folks come over and we tasted a Hudson Valley Albarino. Super cool. I know that's a vitis vinifera, not the hybrids, but why color in the lines?
Yes, that's where I'm kind of at. Like I said, when I was a young kind of gun, and I thought I was going to come into the game as a farmer, which, like I said, I'm a fourth generation farmer with apples and stone fruit. And I had this big idea: Pinot Noir and Riesling and Cabernet Franc, and we have some Cabernet Sauvignon going. And I kind of, at this point in my career, I'm kind of reverting to those older world grapes that were kind of the stepping stone for these other grapes that the Hudson Valley is growing, because we're kind of losing grasp of those older grapes that kind of really kind of set the foundation for the Hudson Valley. So we are kind of planting those older varieties, not as desirable varieties, but something like an example is like our Baco Noir is something we make 65 cases of Baco Noir, and we usually bottle in February. And by the end of March, it's something that is so sought after that it's literally flies off the shelf.
Right. I mean, you're talking 65 cases here, and if it's delicious, then it's going to be desirable, right?
It's very desirable, and we have people calling. So it's kind of reintroducing the older style grapes that were really the originality of the Hudson Valley, especially since we do have the oldest winery in the world. We have the oldest vineyard in the, not the world, but the Americas. So it's kind of something I'm kind of reverting and kind of taking my stubborn thoughts in my head that's been blown up. I can do this, and kind of reverting to the old world, kind of growing some grapes that are actually have some meaning in the Hudson Valley, and kind of bringing those grapes back to life.
I love it. You had a couple of specific questions come through. I just want to make sure people feel seen here. So you did mention you are expanding your grape acreage at Nostrano.
Yeah, we're planting another 1.5 acres of Pinot Noir. We just planted in the spring another acre of Pinot Gris, which is also very limited. That's about a 45 case harvest, which is very tough. That's not an easy one that we do down here. Especially for just the amount of sunlight we get and all that. But we do make a really nice Pinot Gris. Surprisingly, very small harvest. That's about 25 cases a year. Gammy Noir is another one we planted. Chelios is another one we planted. So like I said, I'm kind of not saying reverting, but I'm kind of going back to the old style reds. I kind of want to mess around with a little bit of natural fermentation, natural yeast, stuff of that matter. Kind of getting a little bit back to the kind of old world Hudson Valley kind of grapes. I take a lot of inspiration from just some of the old farmers in my area that I see that are literally located next to me that are just kind of, they're not winemakers. They grow the grapes, and just kind of learning from them, growing the grapes that they've been growing for 45, 50 years, and kind of taking advantage of the way they've planted and way they're growing, and kind of trying to rejuvenate like those old world grapes that if you said like Chelios, no one really is going to be like, oh, Chelios, that's a great wine. Trying to kind of bring those things back to have people taste those and be like, okay, this is a wine that I could see maybe on a shelf in a liquor store. So trying to do some kind of cool things like that.
But also if I have to choose between a grape that I've heard of, let's say Pinot Noir, where someone has to manipulate it and force it to being something that it isn't naturally, whereas you could be doing a native or a hybrid or one of these more historic varietals that someone's never heard of, but you could do it in a more minimal intervention style without additives or a heavy hand, and they could be tasty. I'd take that 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like that's also like kind of part of our thing here at Nostrano. A lot of our wine tasting takes place, and a lot of our sales take place in our tasting room, take place right on premise. So when you're talking to me, I'm usually behind the bar. I'm not too far. So I'm able to give you a little bit of history, a little bit of knowledge about the grape you're trying. So when you're trying a different wine that you never heard of, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of backstory to it, and kind of give people a little bit of knowledge of kind of what's kind of going on in the Hudson Valley and how we kind of can set ourselves apart from the Finger Lakes or Long Island, and kind of give ourselves a little bit of a, diversity, especially being kind of set in this weird spot in the Hudson Valley where we don't get much recognition for growing grapes. Like I said, myself, I'm an apple farmer. I've grown apples since I was a young kid. I'm fourth generation. We've grown peaches and stone fruit. So I've kind of converted our farm into more of growing grapes and kind of got away from apples and stuff. So I'm still kind of on my way up and growing different varieties and kind of just trying to kind of bring a little bit of a new age kind of feel, especially being very located next to New York City and New Jersey. We kind of have very good, flow of people that can come up here and kind of be able to expose people to a wine they've never heard of and say, hey, this is a Chelios or a Baco Noir, and they can bring that back to their friends or their family and say, hey, look at this varietal that I found. And it's kind of worked out for us that way. So.
Great. Nick, I got two quick ones for you. Juan is curious, do you ship your wines outside of New York State?
Yeah, we do. We definitely been shipping. That's happened in the last year or two. We've kind of been shipping out to the rest of the country there. So we do ship quite often, which is kind of a new thing to us. We are in a few kind of local liquor stores and wine stores. But like I said, we're a very small production. So when we're talking about Pinot Noir, me and my two guys, we are literally de-stemming this by hand. We're crushing by hand. A lot of everything we do is by hand for now, which is good because of our quantity of what we're bringing in. And I think it kind of brings a kind of a cool kind of perception into wine and, not being such large production, but everything being done by hand from capsules to labels to de-stemming. So it's a fun experience, and I'm glad I'm able to be here with you guys and be able to be part of this and be accepted into this awesome wine community. Especially, I'm a beer drinker. I'm sorry.
Listen, it takes a lot of good beer to make great wine.
That's what I'm saying. When we're crushing grapes, I'm drinking beer. So
good for you, mate. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Moving on, we have wine number 5. I'm going to introduce Lynn Fahey, the winemaker from Keuka Spring Vineyard. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm just rounding up harvest, finished pressing reds last week, so feels good to put that all to bed. Speaking of reds, you have our 2019 Cabernet Franc. So I'm actually new to Keuka Spring, started in May this year. I've been in the region for about 4 years, but Keuka Spring has been around since the early 80s, first vintage in 1985. We only have about 10 acres planted on our property, one to Cabernet Franc. So we do purchase fruit from other vineyards around the region. Most of our reds coming from the southeast side of Seneca Lake. And Cab Franc is kind of becoming, or is the primary vinifera red that's being produced in the Finger Lakes, or is showing to be a very strong contender to be one of the top red wines in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, I think so.
What's that?
I think deservedly so.
Yeah, honestly, I was thinking about this wine when it was chosen, and even given this year, which was perfect for red wines in general. Cabernet Franc really sits in this mid-range where the bud break doesn't happen too early, so it's at less risk for frost damage, and we're at mid ripen, so we can get a little bit of hang time on it as well and actually get full ripeness, where things like Cabernet Sauvignon, we have a little bit more, it's more variable year to year because it just needs such a long time to really hit true physiological ripeness, whereas Cabernet Franc's a little bit more forgiving. And in 2019, it was actually, although it was a cooler year, was a really good year for reds. So it started out to be, the whole summer growing season was more mild, and then it warmed up a little bit in September, and then all of a sudden October cooled way down. So I remember in 19 having a little bit of a break early October before we started picking again late October into late November. And I remember walking in the vineyards thinking, these grapes are, sugar is ripening very slow, but physiologically they're so flavorful and the tannins are so supple. So 19 ended up being a really great year for reds across the board, for at least for me, like Lemberger's, Cab Francs, stuff that's in that mid-range area. I also think Cabernet Franc is one of the most versatile reds for food. It has this ability to have kind of fruit, but more like savory herbal elements like rosemary and sage, along with having supple tannins and bright acidity, especially coming out of the Finger Lakes. So I think for me, Cabernet Franc pairs with almost anything. If you're going from like turkey to roast beef, I mean, it hits a huge range, and it's just really delicious and has tons of aging potential. So it wasn't my initially like favorite variety to work with when I moved here, but it's slowly becoming something that I'm kind of seeking after to do more. But yeah, and I really love the way the 19 turned out. I inherited the wines, but blended them together to bottle. So it's been interesting to see them evolve since I had them in tank to now. Another side note too, there's no oak on this Cab Franc. Keuka Spring has had a long history of doing no oaked reds at all. So that's kind of a unique point for this one as well, trying to maintain that freshness and fruit through its life.
Yeah, I think you need a certain quality on the fruit to withstand that oak, and then you end up kind of with some of those big, powerful wines like from Chenin that are all of that shaved wood and pencil lead, and they take so much time. And I don't know that that's what people have in their mind when they think New York State wines. I think they want drinkability.
Yeah.
And so, I was really impressed with this, just having balance of the fruit to, you know that it's Cabernet Franc. There is that very kind of trademark capsicum, that little bit of kind of bell pepper there. But I think what I struggle with sometimes is when people kind of blend that, manipulate that out, where they almost make it too clean and too polished. But this is super drinkable. It's great.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's the ability to have like green flavors without being like underripe. So you can have a little bit of the green pepper, you can have that herbal character, but that doesn't mean it's not like ripe. I mean, I've tasted really underripe Cab Francs and it's extreme, but we get this really nice balance here, and it's again more in that refreshing savory. Like I really enjoy red wines that tend to lean into that kind of herbaceousness, again, without being just like straight up green flavored. And I think one of the things that has drawn me to the Finger Lakes more and more, especially with the reds, is drinkability. I worked in the West Coast for a while, and drinking a 15% alcohol Cab from California is a lot. Like I have a half a glass and I'm like, I'm a little hot. But with our wines, like I can sit down with a Finger Lakes red and like have a bottle and feel very good about it and be ready to open the next one. Like they're refreshing, they're bright, they have liveliness and so much expression. And so it's kind of a gift of the climate that we have here to make red wines like this.
That's awesome. What other places have you worked that kind of, brought you here? And then we have some questions, particularly about this kind of aging potential of Finger Lakes Cabernet Franc, maybe particularly the Keuka Springs. Have you had opportunities to taste some back vintages of Keuka Spring Cab Franc? How does it develop over time?
Yeah, so I have tasted a few. It does develop really well. I think my thing with the Finger Lakes reds, I tend to find them to be kind of hitting peak around 5 years. I think some can go further, if you let them, but they tend to, I think, really hit a sweet spot in 5 years. And I don't know, and I think for something with the production too, I think we're able to get enough extraction from the tannins alone in the skins through that fermentation, that's kind of what allows for that aging potential without needing to be an oak. And then also with that acidity being a little bit more lively than you might find in more of that West Coast style, also allows it to have a little bit more life further on, which to me is more comparable to, like, I think I worked in Oregon for 3 years before moving back to the Finger Lakes. And it was kind of the first experience I had some older Bordeaux's from like the 60s. And they were 12% alcohol, tons of freshness, really earthy, and had aged remarkably well. Because for a long time, I never was like, oh, I don't really like Cab Sauv, like Merlot's not really for me. And then I was tasting these older vintages of these wines that were a little bit more refined, which I think the Finger Lakes fits into more of that category than that bigger style of Bordeaux red. And so I think it ages more earthy than like fruity or dried fruit or nutty than maybe some other wines.
Other question, comparing Finger Lakes Cab Franc to maybe North Fork, Long Island Cab Franc. And that's a tough one even for me.
I don't know. I haven't had enough Cab Francs from the North Fork to have a comparison. Their climate's, I think, a little bit more milder than ours. So I'm assuming they might get a little bit more ripeness, a little more like higher alcohol potential. But I don't know I can't pinpoint a distinct difference, but I haven't had enough of them to say.
That's okay. Let's Long Island with our final wine, and we might be able to find some common threads there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have any Thanksgiving traditions you'd like to share? Anything food related, not food related?
Usually, in non-COVID times, when I live here, I've been back now for 3 years, but I was gone for a while. My grandmother lives in Warwick, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley. And we go down and see her as a family and do Thanksgiving there. This year I will be doing Thanksgiving in my house with my roommates because no one's really traveling right now. My sister's a nurse in the emergency department in Rochester. So we're taking all the precautions to kind of wait this one out next year. Next year we'll get back to a little bit more normal traditions.
We've been doing Friendsgiving here in London with my kind of little community of expats, and we're going to have to skip that this year too. Actually, we're missing out because we had a friend, he works for Kentucky Fried Chicken, like in the corporate office. And so like we kind of have like the dessert, but then all of a sudden this kind of like big bucket of chicken wings come out, and it's so gluttonous and unnecessary, but
round two.
It's so good. Very good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, we are going to Long Island, home sweet home, with Gerald Bailey, Director of Sales from Lenz Winery. Gerald, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How's everyone?
Good. Talk to me. What you got?
All right. So Lenz is celebrating our 42nd harvest this year. We're really excited to kind of be having that come to an end. We did our last pressing of some Cabernet Sauvignon today. This particular vintage in front of you is the 2014 Estate Selection Cab Sauv. We produced about 280 cases of this particular wine. The great thing about 2014 for us on Long Island, it was pretty moderate temperatures. I don't remember it being much of like a year to remember going to the beach. I think it was about between 70, 75 throughout the entire growing season, really dry. It was actually the biggest harvest that we've seen on Long Island, and especially at Lenz to date. So we actually were able to machine pick this wine, which is a relief from some of the other vintages that we have. This particular wine, it says 100% Cabernet Sauvignon on the sheet here, but I was rereading some notes, and I believe that we have at least 4% of Cabernet Franc blended into this wine. And we always say at Lenz, there's probably a touch of Merlot in everything because that's what we use to top up all of our barrels. But this particular wine, I love the aroma on this particular wine, especially around Thanksgiving. I do get a lot of the herbal, maybe even a little eucalyptus from this particular wine. And it also smells to me like all the fruit pies that you have around Thanksgiving. I just get this really deep sense of like these brambleberries, a little bit of cherry and cranberry as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, this wine, I think of all of our wines, we tried to do neutral or older oak, but being that the estate selection Cabernet Sauvignon was something new to our portfolio, for those of us that know Lenz, you know, we kind of have 3 different style varieties. We have our table entry Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. We have our higher end old vines label that come on those hotter, drier years. And in between, we get the estate selection. And this particular wine, we did about 25% newer oak with 75% and then blended it back together. So we never want to have too oaky of wine. As some panelists before me said, you know, it's about drinkable, approachable wines. But we're fortunate enough that we have 67 planted acres. We do about 5,000 cases across our entire portfolio. And we age the wine and hold it back until we're ready to release it. So it's nice to have 2014 still on our tasting menu. This is a current wine. But yeah, I get a lot of the cherry cranberries, even like a rich blackberry on the finish of this particular wine.
I opened this earlier this evening and put some in the glass, and the oak profile was quite not powerful, but present, you know. And I think it is really opening up now. I mean, I'm probably almost 2.5 hours in the glass.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I actually just opened this bottle and poured it right as Lynn was talking, because I plan on enjoying this wine throughout the rest of tonight. But I do love to see how this wine opens up. I'm not really a big believer in decanting wines unless there's 4 people that really want to get after one bottle immediately. But I do love to uncork a wine, let it breathe in the glass, and enjoy it over the next hour or so, especially with food. I mean, this wine has a nice amount of acidity to it as well. So it craves a nice dinner.
Like Nick's prime rib, right?
Yeah.
Gerald, tell me about your Thanksgiving. What do you got planned?
This year looks very different from most years. I come from a really large family, home based in Tennessee. We have about 35 first cousins that we're all friends. And so I think Ryan said that his Thanksgiving starts on Wednesday. We have a 3-day tradition. Wednesday is wine night, cousins night. It's the younger generation, and that's when all the games come out and we play. Thursday is all about the food. In fact, we don't really drink on Thanksgiving in my family in Tennessee. And then Friday is all the extended family that might have gone to some in-laws' houses or something. But because we don't all get back to Tennessee that often, we treat Thanksgiving as being thankful for one another and coming together as a family reunion. So, and of course, there's food. I've got the task of making the Rickard family jam cake every year. And I don't think anyone likes to do it. It's a 3-layer cake, and I'm not a baker, and it's probably one of the ugliest cakes I've ever seen. But it's essentially a spiced jam cake. But my eldest living uncle, he wants it, and so that's a big part of our tradition.
That ugly cake was missing.
Certain items.
You would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Tell us just a little bit more about Long Island versus, we had a lot of folks, talking about Finger Lakes. We had a good time on the Hudson Valley. I mean, I grew up there. I think about Long Island. I think about the terroir there. I've always kind of described the island as kind of one big sand dune,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in the name, Long Island. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we're an island. We're completely surrounded by a body of water, a maritime climate. So we are cooler in the summer, we're warmer in the winter, which is like perfect for a grape region. Being the loamy, sandy soil that we have, I could think in the last 11 harvests that I've been through, we've had to force water on our vineyard probably only 3 times, that it got a little too hot, a little too dry. So as far as, growing the grapes, it's great conditions, especially the last few years. We've had kind of like an Indian summer for the most part, and just like Cabernet Sauvignon, one of the hardest grapes to, fully mature and ripen to the best of its ability. It's still not going to be, that New World Cabernet Sauvignon, high alcohol. I'm thinking Napa Valley, 17% alcohol sometimes. But this is about 13%. So, we're going to have really drinkable fruit forward wines that come from our region. I also like, I think in a lot of comparison, we're 42 years old this year. We used to want to make a mark and compare ourselves to other wine regions, France being a really big part, but we've really settled into our own identity of what Long Island wine tastes like recently. We have a lot of new winemakers that have turned over that just in the last 5 years. So there's a lot of new varieties coming to the island. We have a lot of Malbec that's been planted, a lot of Syrah. We have Terral de Go, some Traminette that was recently. So, I think Long Island wine, great fruit forward wine and just a lot of excitement of the people in the community here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. You mentioned just kind of the watering, just adding water, and there is a bit of clay in the soil, right? It's a lot of sandy loam, but there is a good amount of clay that can retain some water for you guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that, and we own 2 different properties. So our 67 acres is actually split in 2. And our northern property, we're seeing a lot more of those, clay and moisture holding for sure.
Awesome. Very good. So I want to give our participants, our audience, another opportunity that if they have any questions, throw them into the chat, throw them into the Q&A. And I just had a couple other notes that I wanted to throw kind of out there just to give everyone a minute to make sure there's nothing else stuck in their brain that they want to tackle. But I was talking about I want to talk about grapes that we haven't tasted tonight that really should be on your Thanksgiving table. And I'm gonna kind of just shout out a few if anybody wants to chime in with their opinions. I was thinking, we touched on Gewürztraminer. Like I said, that's a big one. Lemberger, all right, or Blaufränkisch, depending on your preference there. And we were talking about kind of Cab Franc being a flagship, but I think that, Lemberger and Blaufränkisch is really just nipping at the heels as a really kind of top contender for a great red out of the Finger Lakes. And Adrian agrees, Blaufränkisch on Thanksgiving. I think it's great. Get a nice bit of spice on the finish there, which is really nice. Gerald, you just mentioned Merlot. And I think Merlot for me, I fucking love Merlot. And so, sideways all day, but come on, it's such a good grape, and I think it does incredibly well out on Long Island. And for, some of these, we're talking about folks that are, you're not just doing turkey, you're doing ham, you're doing, we got prime rib, we got all these kind of things, that could, use just kind of more of those plummy characteristics that we get from Merlot could be really nice. I also got to give a shout out to rosé, right? A nice savory rosé is probably just the ticket. And I'm glad Nick pulled his out because you really gotta talk rosé here. Jean suggested a white Rhone blend, Marsan Roussan, Viognier. I love it. Fantastic. And beyond wine, I think we'd be silly to not mention New York State cider. I mean, fantastic ciders being produced in New York State. Also, the rye whiskey, our Excelsior rye whiskey now, is just really the perfect little tipple to end that, especially with your dessert there. Chantel threw out Grenache. Love Grenache for sure. Sometimes Grenache can be so big and crazy, but you find one that's balanced, and man, those are heaven. What do you guys think? What else is on your mind for Thanksgiving before we wrap it up?
Just one other variety I'd throw out there, Dan. We just started, we got our second harvest this year. We released our first one, Zweigelt.
Nice.
Is a Lemberger relative, but I think you're going to see a lot more Zweigelt coming out of at least the Finger Lakes. I'm not sure about some of these others. It is another Austrian grape and a Lemberger relative.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think Austrian varietals, just kind of even looking at Gruner Veltliner, really, really nice coming out of the Finger Lakes for sure. And they all are just really wonderful, wonderful food wines. Alex said we can't not mention New York State beer. I agree wholeheartedly, for sure. There's really, I mean, so
We have to give a shout out to the pet nats too. A lot of pet nats that are hitting the market, especially here in Long Island. And we're working on our first one here at Lenz. We're really excited about it. And I think those would be great additions to Thanksgiving dinner.
they're so fun.
They are.
Right? Let's see. Adrian's got Pinot Blanc with a little bit of oak, a little bit of malolactic fermentation, Chardonnay for sure. I mean, Chardonnay is you can't really go wrong with a bit of Chard. Yeah, you know, I listened to a podcast yesterday with a friend. I'm sure everybody knows him. Paul Brady is going to open up a little operation out in Beacon, and you know, he mentioned that New York State is one of the few states that could kind of support this idea of having New York State products kind of across the board: beer, wine, cider, spirits. I mean, we're really lucky. We got it all. That's great. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was super fun, but I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. And don't forget the pumpkin pie. My goodness, how could we forget our pumpkin pie? Fantastic. Guys, thank you all so much for having a chat with me tonight. I really appreciate having you. Thank you so much to the New York State Wine and Grape Foundation for hosting. All the wineries on tonight's panel are available on social media. Hit them up if you have more questions. You're also welcome to go through the New York State Wine and Grape Foundation with additional questions. If you want to hit me up, you can get me on Instagram at dbcheesynyc and goodwineXgoodpeople. Guys, just thank you so much. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Have a great holiday season. I know it's a weird one, but just you know, stay safe and thanks so much, really.
Passing it on to kids like me.
Bye, guys. Have a good enjoy your weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good night.